And we are live on a Monday, and it's an NFL Monday. Welcome in to Sports Gambling with Moneyline Monaco. Alex Monaco here joining you on a riveting day in the NFL. Please subscribe, rate, review if you've been enjoying the podcast back in full swing after a little bit of a Del Boca Vista hiatus after Chiefs-Eagles. We are rocking. We are rolling. Just quick little administrative notes. 3 better half-hour shows this week on MSG Networks where I host a TV show. That's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Plenty of college basketball breakdowns. Some professional bettors joining me on the show. We're also going to talk out a little NFL off-season shopping, zip around the NBA a little. We're going to touch on Champions League, where I went 3-1 last week on picks. How you doing? But today's episode is all about NFL free agency. We have Justin Fields in New York Jet Green. We have Sam Darnold, the USC wonder, headed to the PNW. And I love the fit. I'm not going to lie. Seattle Seahawks. A lot of USC movement here. Pete Carroll to Vegas. He grabs Geno, his old lad. Sammy heads up to Seattle and joins a fascinating NFC West where he will face old teammates in the San Francisco 49er land twice a season. And just high level before we just discuss, and I will ultimately tie it in to some betting and what we've seen. Obviously, before all of this ensued, DK Metcalf is a Pittsburgh Steeler. Now, interesting kind of not side story, but it wasn't a household name in the Pittsburgh Steeler offensive line. The Tennessee Titans came out of nowhere to overpay for Dan Moore Jr., and CBS Sports has given it a C- grade. So you have an interesting spot in Pittsburgh where you're clearly going to just roll up the sleeves and pay DK Metcalf real money. You're doubling down on the anti-narrative that Pittsburgh can't get the offense right. Doubling down on it, yet quarterbacks in the musical chairs are starting to fill up. Other mob around the league moments, huge trade for the Washington Commanders. They shore up a 5-time Pro Bowler in Laramie Tunsil. We all remember his how you doing NFL draft moment. Blockbuster deal. Texans get a haul of picks. I don't want to say an OKC Thunder haul, but a lot of movement already with the Houston Texans, a seemingly open to detached approach here in the offseason already with just who they're all right with letting go. Although, I will say, some teams on this day one that were kind of sticking out to me, aside from what I loved with the Jets and, of course, all things, musical chairs quarterbacks. How about the Buccaneers? They re-signed Godwin, who is just a huge security blanket in addition to Chris Evans, but it's more so just letting the foundation of this Bucs offense continue to have rollover T-Mobile minutes. Continuity going on now, years plural, with your big three. And that's something in the NFL you may say is just a normal thing. Let's re-sign our studs in Evans and Godwin, but you're looking at how difficult that exact scenario is around the league to keep a couple of guys happy. And the wide receiver carousel that continues as Devontae lands in L.A. is a lot of moving parts. But the Bucs, they get a pass rusher in Hassan Reddick, which I really like. And, on the defensive side, you knew this was coming. Just kind of going to bounce around here. The Josh Sweat to the Cardinals. Josh Sweat was going to capitalize and cash in with the playoff run he had on that front seven with the Philadelphia Eagles. And it was a no-brainer. Absolutely no-brainer. And then you take a look at also, I believe he went to, I think it was Milton, went to the Patriots. So Vrabel already on the move defensively. But this is just the turnover that happens. You're going to see what happens with Mekhi Becton. But a lot of Super Bowl winning change for the Philadelphia Eagles already. Now, I guess from a wide receiver perspective, and you did see, of all people, Joshua, to be exact. I think it was 3 years, $33 million, locking in with the Buffalo Bills. So the Chargers, who have been Ladd McConkey and not much else on offense, at least pass catching, you're sitting here, you're watching Palmer get taken. Dobbins is out there on the board. Now, they did re-sign Mack, which you like. But let's just talk wide receivers. We're looking at the Shefty big board here, courtesy of ESPN. Now, Devontae to the Rams for a 2-year deal. Godwin off that awful injury. Maybe it was a do-good spot there for the Bucs organization to lock him up. But you're still looking at Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Brandon Cooks, and Tyler Lockett. And those are all solid pieces that, pending fit, I'm curious to see where they lock in. Now, there's really only 2 huge question marks at quarterback before the NFL draft, as we've discussed on the show. And I did give you, if you want to call it value, but at least a tip-off of what you can do on the live NFL offseason market. And the Vegas Raiders were sitting there at the bottom of the futures board at plus 20,000. Plus 20,000 to win the Super Bowl. And again, I'm not telling you to purchase the Raiders before they signed Geno Smith, which, again, at the time we had no idea, for the idea that they're going to win the Super Bowl. You get an ROI pending where you shop at a lot of spots if you're inking something that goes the opposite way in value. And the Raiders are plus 11,000 now. I mean, literally from 20,000 to 11,000. Now, I'm sitting on a Steelers ticket, and now I'm sitting on, I've been sitting on a Giants ticket, but now I'm sitting on a Steelers ticket because I'm following this Aaron Rodgers news. I want to know where Aaron Rodgers goes, and I'm not going to sit here and make it an Aaron Rodgers pod or a long soliloquy, but you got Russell Wilson left, Aaron Rodgers left, Daniel Jones, if you're going to put him in the conversation. Pittsburgh clearly needs a quarterback. We're really not quite sure what the Giants are going to do now. American sports books don't have a live where players are going to land market, but overseas does, and according to Bovada, it's still laying juice for the Giants to ultimately land Aaron Rodgers. Now, does that shock the world? They went out and got another decent piece, solid cover piece on defense today as we speak. But, this Giants pass rush, as I tried to say on the Better Half Hour this past week, was leading the league through 8 weeks with 35 sacks. I mean, for as bad as the offense was, for as inept as the Daniel Jones experiment and botching the Saquon thing was, and the Andrew Thomas, Evan Neal, the debauchery that's gone on offense, you got to look at the Giants defense, 8th best pass D last year and top 10 in sacks, as something to at least build off of. And Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and the other Tibbs is nothing to snuff at on the front 7 line. And this is one of these leagues where you really have to take and tip your fro to what the Eagles did to the Chiefs as something serious to consider for futures offseason shopping. What I mean is Jalen Hurts was in nobody's top 5 quarterback conversation. In the offseason in the last 2 years after Mahomes got around $450 million, whatever he signed at the time, you saw the Trevor Lawrences get $50 million. Justin Herbert get $50 million. Burrow, in my opinion, the only one that really was deserving because he had playoff success of that number, was getting upside of that number. But there's other ways to build infrastructure in the NFL. And you have an interesting kind of 3-scenario bracket spiel going on in the NFL. You have the young guys on rookie deals or new quarterbacks coming in, and you build off the C.J. Stroud rookie deal type spiels. You got top dollar, Josh Allen just re-signed. Quarterbacks, you have to now, really, which is probably what Jim Harbaugh would not want, ways to go about building your team. Quarterback, top dollar. And then the third way to build it is the Howie way. And to the Jets' credit, and to, we'll call it, I guess, Seattle at the moment's credit, they did not go out and drop the same amount of money at quarterback that the trend rest of the league was doing in the last 2 years to shore up assets or go steal a guy. So you have this interesting secondary quarterback market where the Genos, the Sams, the Fields are nowhere near at the same cafeteria table as the Mahomes and the Allens and the Lamars. But you're coming off the heels of a season where the media and the slander of the no running back necessary ridiculous take proved the exact opposite. And had it been a Derrick Henry versus Saquon Super Bowl, which it really should have, it would have been absolutely even more of a home run of the changing of the guard. But as we stare at probably what we've seen in DK Metcalf going to Pittsburgh and Devontae Adams going to LA, outside of Diggs, which I guess you call a wide receiver one still, but he's just not that guy that he used to be, this is finally quieting down this wild quarterback market where you're paying more than really we should for a lot of guys, but you just have to. You get hit, you get strapped, and then you have to do what Jerry's World did or the Jaguars did. And all right, we like them, but we don't love them. But you got to be a little unique with your thinking. And so to wrap that all up, is there any other wide receivers on the board before we start to build the other infrastructures of these offseason teams and takes that really stick out to you? And I guess you could buy low on Amari Cooper. I think Keenan Allen, ironically, back to the Chargers would be a very fitting, solid fit. They need something to rely on for Herbert. But as you start to look at where Russell Wilson could go, where Aaron Rodgers could go, would you pair any of those wide receivers with him? And you have, ironically, a scenario where you got Russell Wilson, who, and I don't know how Pittsburgh Steelers feel about this, fans, Steelers country, Tyler Lockett's on the board, and Russ is on the board. And this is kind of a fascinating snub. I mean, the Justin Fields camp didn't have a ton of hand and said, I'm all set on staying in Pittsburgh and proving worth. I'm going to go to a place that wants me. And Justin Fields on the Jets is an interesting team to talk out, especially, God forbid, God willing, you start building offensive line around Justin Fields, Mekhi Becton, if it can be worked around cap-wise. But where Aaron Rodgers, and again, I'm just bouncing around this podcast, it's pure reaction, where Aaron Rodgers could end up is now only a number of teams. I still find it compelling because McVay was interested. Now, it's been a quiet, almost too quiet San Francisco 49ers last few months. All you've really heard is not great, I guess, anything locker room wise. And then you come out of this Monday and Charvarius Ward is in a different uniform. And Hufanga is a Bronco. And Debo's a Commander. And it's almost too quiet in Niners land. And so it'd be really fascinating, and I know I've done the Aaron Rodgers pitch a ton, but it would be really fascinating to sit here and say, can a veteran quarterback in one season go to a team that already has a guy, but still in a unique scenario where you can get Russ for maybe not what he's been charging over the last couple of years post-Seattle, and the Rodgers scenario where the Jets are picking up a portion of the tab? Could you make a case for a competitor already like a San Francisco 49ers to go out and add off of Purdy, staff him, stuff him for the season to just see what could be done? But not a lot of people like this take. I just find it fascinating when we sit here in the Niners' defense of everything and act like we're not allowed to touch a conversation about a 7th-round draft pick that I still got questions about. I'm not saying I'm anti-Purdy. What I'm saying is maybe it doesn't hurt to bring in, if you can't afford it, potentially something on the likes of a Rodgers or a Wilson. If you're trying to win now, I just want you to do the win one game theory and do it from a quarterback perspective. I just can't come off a season where the Chiefs were about to win 3, and the whole narrative was, how are we going to build rosters to beat this one team, or how are we going to compete and find our own Mahomes, when I always do this comp. It's back to the Splash Brothers era. You're not going to find Clay and Steph together, just like you're not going to find Andy Reid and Mahomes together. So how can you look at the painting differently? How can you approach NFL offseason differently? Nobody has done what I'm suggesting. But again, it's kind of that Falcons pushback. You're going to sign Cousins, and then you're going to draft Penix, and you're going to cook yourself, or you guarantee yourself insurance. I mean, this was the same Niners team, if we're really going full sales pitch on a car you don't need off the lot, a used car at that, Aaron Rodgers, Wilson. This is the same team that Christian McCaffrey was taking NFC championship reps with, because they couldn't find a healthy quarterback to back them up. So if somehow, some way, Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson ends up out of a starting quarterback scenario here, is it that far-fetched to put him on a San Francisco 49ers roster? Injuries could happen. 2-quarterback formation worth, not call me crazy, something in the 2025 playbook that could be on the menu. And a 2-quarterback Super Bowl MVP lands. It's just, to me, something to put in your back pocket as we're hunting, scouring the board for value and ROIs. And to put a button on it, Russell Wilson, after Seattle, on his way to Denver, Denver was like 31-1 before they signed him, and all odds went in half. And when Super Bowl odds go in half, typically that affects the AFC and the conference in the same way. And so, is there anything on the NFC side of things that maybe is worth value as the quarterbacks trickle in and fill up? I still think the San Francisco scenario is interesting. On the running back side, Najee Harris on the board, J.K. Dobbins, Nick Chubb, Raheem Mostert, Rico Dowdle. That's going to be interesting to see how running backs off the offseason, and all of those guys were getting real reps. 3 of them starting running backs last year. Hybrid 4 with Dowdle ultimately earning the spot. But this is going to be interesting to see what kind of dollars these guys get. A couple other people still on the board that have to trickle out. Now, DJ Reed left. That was an interesting landing spot. He goes, takes top dollar out of the Jets world to go to Detroit. But again, a little bit of musical chairs defensively with Detroit in the past 48, 24. Have to give credit, in a big Ben Johnson way, to what the Chicago Bears have done in this offseason. Multiple. Joe Thuney they trade for. They go out today and they ink a D squared. Drew, it's off the top of my head here. Solid dude, Drew Dalman. Immediately addressing necessary needs. And this is a Washington-Chicago next team up movement. The NFL, unlike the NBA, doesn't have a lot of really far away teams. They don't. There are not a lot of unwatchable, in my opinion, teams that have no talent, no direction, and no conceivable Seinfeld reason for getting up in the morning. I think it's certainly less than 10, and I certainly think you can make the case it's less than 5. And these are low self-esteem Tennessee, Cleveland, Jacksonville franchises that should have already figured it out. And to that thought, Tennessee 1, Cleveland 2, just do what you should do. Just get a quarterback. Stop messing around. Stop playing with your food. Cam Ward's right there. Shadur Sanders is right there. Get it done. So It's just not a lot of spots. It's going to be very fascinating to see secondary market. And again, I believe Wednesday's the official day where ink can go to pen. Ink can go to contract to fully wrap this all up. You're starting, though, to see themes a little bit of how these clubs are building around their talent. And I'm impressed. I thought this was a very exciting first NFL free agency day. I think a lot of teams showed you that are young, that they're out there willing to spend money. I mean, again, Carlton Davis from the Lions to the Patriots is a big signing. It's a lot for a guy who does get banged up, but that's a guy that's been solid in Tampa Bay that goes to a Mike Vrabel club, and you kind of get an inkling like Vrabel's building as he did in Tennessee, similar infrastructure. Let's look out and see what a couple of teams, to put a button on this show, end up doing in the next couple days here that are big splashes. Is there anything left that's huge splashes? I think New Orleans hasn't been talked about at all at quarterback. What's going on down there in the South? You haven't heard a lot out of Jerry's world either. Does he pair the Diggs brothers? Does this start to get interesting in a couple of different ways from a couple of these big market teams? Fascinated to see what the Pittsburgh Steelers do. The Pittsburgh Steelers traded Kenny Pickett. Pittsburgh Steelers acquired Pickett to the Browns, by the way, from the Eagles to the Browns. Pittsburgh Steelers let a lineman go. Najee's open. They sign a wide receiver for top dollar and let Fields go. I mean, that is absolutely fascinating for a team that has had one side of the football locked in and the other side nothing but pushback on. And they have allowed several guys. Also, Minnesota clearly showing you they're going with the kid. I mean, Daniel Jones was traded for in the middle of the season, believe it or not, and two of their three quarterbacks are gone. Just a very, very interesting day one. High level here from a futures perspective. I mean, Super Bowl-wise, you got your top 7 teams, but you start getting in the value side of things. I mean, the Chicago Bears have moved on the futures market. They were dancing in the mid-40s as recent as less than a month ago. They're down, depending where you shop, at 36-1. Another couple of teams that maybe from the really far outside looking in could be interesting. I did mention that Pittsburgh Steelers team at 55-1. I mean, and again, you could put small money on this, but 55-1 for a team that's likely going to be in the playoffs again. I mean, gotta be tough to argue against value. And I did mention that Raiders team that I inked at plus 20,000 is now down to 10,000. And the last two teams on the futures board are the New York Giants and the Tennessee Titans. But the New York Jets moved up a smidge, believe it or not. They're at plus 14,000. This is just insane to me. But in a year, again, where the best quarterback did not win, and I would like to think if you re-rolled it up pre-flop, the best coach did not win, you could sit here and say, all right, we have an opportunity to still build the best roster and not have to go and do it like the Kansas City Chiefs. Best quarterback, best coach, which we've seen still 2 of the last 3 years. Going to be very interesting. Justin Fields is a New York Jet. The Aaron Rodgers Jets official chapter comes to a close on Monday, March 10th, even though it was a couple of weeks ago. Aaron Glenn finds his guy. They go younger. Didn't mention that he's relinking with Garrett Wilson, his college teammate at Ohio State, which is a fun little backstory. So as we get out of here, Philly's still your chalk to win it all next year, plus 650. Then the Ravens and the Chiefs, followed by the Bills, the Lions, the Niners, the Bengals, and the Washington Commanders are less than 20-1. But we will see where Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson move to, and do they move the futures board? very interesting on the Moneyline Monaco podcast. Appreciate you listening. We will see you next show. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. And as always, don't forget to hug your mothers. Ta-ta real smooth.